Hey, everybody, what's happening? We got another episode of The Strange Road coming for you. I'm your host, Mikey, and of course, as always, Bub, the co-host.
Hello.
And tonight we got Stoner and Disborough in Master Control, making everything look and sound dope. As usual, there they are. What's happening, fellas? Look at Matt. Hard at work, dude.
Loving it.
Look at that guy. Yeah, man. Always looking good there in Master Control. Thanks there, fellas. And you guys can follow us at The Strange Road on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter, the Facebook group Strange Road Hitchhikers. We appreciate everybody that's watching and listening. If you're in YouTube, share, like, subscribe, hit that notification bell also. And it just lets you know whenever we're live streaming or a premiere is ready to come out.
Don't miss
Clips.
Don't miss it.
We're doing shorts, so keep aware of everything there. And then anybody that's listening in Spotify, Apple, Google Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts, hit us with that 5-star rating. It really, really does help the algorithm. Share the episode if you enjoy it. And we're always trying to dial things in here, but we appreciate the hell out of all you guys. Oh, I did mention all of our premieres and live streams in YouTube are completely ad-free, and a great way to support the show is with super stickers, super chats. So, Did I miss anything?
I don't think so. I think you did a great job covering everything. We try to keep everything dialed in. Yeah. Top to bottom, cleaned house. Let's do it.
Yep, absolutely. And we've been on a run this week. We've had some incredible episodes, and we're wrapping up our recordings.
I've been hungry and I've been tired. Two things that tell me that we've been on the right track with these episodes we've been doing lately and the conversations we've been having, because I'm mentally and physically exhausted and I'm hungry.
But fulfilled.
Oh, my God. It's great.
Fulfilled.
Yeah, I feel satisfied daily.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I mean, we can get into it if you guys want. If you want to hop into it,
I'm ready.
We can introduce our next guest. And tonight we have a fantastic episode for you guys. We actually met our guest a little bit kind of last year during CryptidCon, kind of introduced ourselves a little bit. That's where we got on our next guest radar. Let's introduce Bigfoot naturalist John Hickenbottom, everybody. John, how the heck are you, man?
Good. How about you?
Doing great. Hey, we've been...
Well, thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. We kind of ran into you. Micah Hanks kind of called you out during his presentation and referenced something, some of your work, or referenced you in his presentation and kind of called you out. And you're like, hey, and we were sitting right behind you. So after Micah Hanks wrapped up, we introduced ourselves, said, hey, we're a couple Ohio guys, started this podcast, and we kind of had a little chat. But we've been following you on Instagram, and we've covered your Bigfoot video series for the Ohio Department of Natural Resources in our show Strange Happenings. And so we really want to just find out a little bit more about yourself, where we can find you, and how you became a naturalist and eventually looking into Bigfoot.
Yeah. So I've how did I become a naturalist thing? First of all, I grew up in Eastern Ohio, and if you're not familiar with Eastern Ohio, it's a really great spot for biodiversity, and it's an awesome place to be a kid that's into that sort of thing. So I kind of grew up becoming a naturalist. Most naturalists didn't decide, on career day that's what they wanted to do. You know what I mean? Most of them were kind of already a naturalist when they decided, when they found out you can do this for a living. And kind of the big difference between, say, being a naturalist and say a wildlife biologist is that I handle mostly education. I sort of wanted to be a wildlife biologist at first, and then got really into educating people, and it's a cool job. We're another name for what we do is we're interpreters. Okay, so if you go to a national park, we're considered they're interpretive rangers. We don't use the R word anymore. In ODNR, but they're interpretive rangers, and that idea of interpretation, it is kind of like interpreting a language. We're taking complex ecological ideas, complex natural history. We're taking biological concepts that maybe, the layperson who visits a park on vacation isn't going to be that interested in, if you do a lecture on them, they're not going to attend so what we do is kind of break that stuff down into manageable and digestible pieces that people can then take home with them. You know what I mean? Like they remember certain things. You kind of identify what the idea that you're trying to get across to them, that's the one thing that you want them to take home, and you make that interesting enough for them to absorb it. So that's kind of a big part of my job. But how I became that is I grew up looking for snakes and salamanders and stuff. I kind of knew that, I wanted to be Steve Irwin. That's I wanted to be the crocodile hunter, But, so that's kind of how I became, a naturalist. But I grew up out here, and I've worked for ODNR for 10 years now. I think going on 11 years now. So it's a pretty fulfilling job. And I live here in Eastern Ohio still. I kind of moved around and traveled all over for work for a while. And then ultimately came back to Eastern Ohio. I live about 9.5 miles from where I grew up, and about 9 miles from the park that I work at. So, and I've got my wife, who I always joke, she's like she's like the pallbearer to my Undertaker. She's like my hype. She's my hype person.
Yeah.
Love it.
Because she doesn't like to get interviewed for things. She doesn't, you know what I mean? But whenever we go to these conferences and things, she's like, "Oh, hey, you've got a podcast. You should talk to my husband." You know what I mean? Like,
oh yeah,
she does.
That's great.
She does quite a bit of that. And then I've got 4 kids here. We all live on a farm here in Eastern Ohio. And, it's pretty cool that's kind of what I wanted to do to begin with. Everybody that gets into this job thinks like, I'm going to live in a cabin and wake up counting ducks every day. You know what I mean? Like on a pond out behind my cabin. And, most often that doesn't happen, but I kind of lucked out. I ended up, getting a place that has, I'm able to kind of do that. I can wake up and there's fawns and, deer in my backyard and things, so it
sounds amazing.
It's kind of, it's pretty cool. I really wouldn't change it, but yeah, so that's, my background has always been natural history. I'm kind of a reptile amphibian guy. So salamanders, snakes, like I said, I wanted to be Steve Irwin. So things like snakes and salamanders and stuff always fascinated me. So that was kind of my area of interest for a really long time. And then, well, I'm going to be completely honest. You mentioned like how I got into Bigfoot, how I ended up there. So I grew up in this area. So we grew up with the Ohio Grassman stuff. And then of course, like I was actually gone. I'd moved away in 2011 when Finding Bigfoot came to the park. And there was kind of a big, there was sort of a bubble that grew around, there was kind of a mania that grew around the Bigfoot thing that kind of coalesced in 2011, around Finding Bigfoot coming to the Salt Fork. And then I think Monster Quest came right just before Finding Bigfoot. Monster Quest came to the park, and then Finding Bigfoot came, and everything sort of coalesced in this big Bigfoot mania. I had actually moved away. I was living up in Knox County at the time. And, but I grew up around it with all the stories. And I think even when I was the brief period that I was in Boy Scouts, I think we had gone to one of Don Keating's conferences up in Newcomers Town. The scout troop had. I don't really remember it very well, but my dad claims that we did. So, I when I got back to the area and started working for the state, I was very dismissive of the whole Bigfoot thing. I'd gone to college, and also, I had all this cool stuff that I wanted to tell people, about birds and plants and snakes and stuff. And then I was spending, 80% of my time talking to guys about, Bigfoot and also like dads. And I always joke like dads in cargo shorts and tube socks, oh, have you seen Bigfoot? You know what I mean?
I know someone
that
like
sort
that.
of thing. Right. So it was maybe a little hard to stomach at first, you know what I mean? Because it's like, oh my God, like I just wanted to. There's so many other cool, real thing, quote unquote, real things that you could be out here doing, and here you are looking for Bigfoot. And then, I think so. it's not, if you've been to a conference, that there's not always there's not always the most well-adjusted, there's always, it's kind of peppered with people who maybe aren't the most well-adjusted folks.
Sure.
You know what I mean? So there's also that element, and those that tends to be the kind of the wackiest theories and stuff tend to be the most vocal, so that was a lot of my exposure too, was I was getting the loudest and the wackiest of the wacky,
Right.
So I was very dismissive about it. And then like this line of work, natural resources in general, you got to move around a lot at first while you're getting established. You start out working seasonal jobs and things, Memorial Day through Labor Day stuff. And you don't really get anywhere if you only do that, so you got to be willing to move for the work.
Yeah.
And I moved to a park in Southern Ohio for a few years, even further south than I am here, and came back in 2016. And when I came back, the Bigfoot thing had really, the naturalists that had filled in, the naturalists that had worked there in the interim, like from the time that I started at Salt Fork and then left and then came back, she had started doing Bigfoot hikes. Now I had done 2 really well attended kind of one-off programs for 2 summers. I did middle of the day, like a Saturday in July. I did these quote unquote Bigfoot hikes, and it was mostly like a hook. It was a hook to draw people in, and this would have probably been 2012. This would have been like 2012, 2013. My first 2 seasons on at Salt Fork, and I grew up out at Salt Fork. My family didn't have land. We lived in a little town. So I grew up out there, and actually I'd started volunteering with the Naturalist at Salt Fork when I was 13. And I worked out there in high school, as what's called just a general worker, for the park. But, I in 2012, I got on as the actual naturalist. I graduated college, I had a degree and everything. And so, I did these 2 one-off programs. They were all right. I mean, they were well attended, but they weren't anything special as far as Bigfoot goes, So the naturalist that had filled in, she had sort of farmed the Bigfoot thing out. She found like a nice core of volunteers, Bigfoot researchers in the local area. And she sort of farmed it out. She would sort of facilitate the Bigfoot hike, but they would do all the nuts and bolts stuff. Well, when I got back to the park, I'm like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. You know what I mean? Because if these guys are the ones that are risking their reputation, my point of view at the time was like, well, then, if they want to risk their reputation talking about Bigfoot, that's on them. I'll do some owl calls and stuff. You know what I mean? I'll hang out and make sure nobody twists an ankle, and I'll call in some owls. That was kind of my stance on it for a while. And I was respectful, as I wouldn't like disrespect the whole thing, but if somebody asked me a Bigfoot question, I would always defer to the Bigfoot researchers that were there, and that was fine. But like with anything, when you're exposed to more and more of it, you start to like, regardless of my skepticism slowly started to wane with it. Not so much my skepticism as my cynicism about the subject started to wane. The more they would show me, footprint evidence, the more they would, the more sound recordings I would hear. My skepticism or my cynicism about it began to wane, because you're supposed to be skeptical. A good scientist is skeptical. You know what I mean?
Sure.
I try to remain skeptical, but I'm no longer cynical about it for quite a few different reasons. I mean, I've talked to the sheer number of people that I've talked to who seemingly don't have any skin in the Bigfoot game. You know what I mean? Who had an experience, and they don't seem to be lying. They don't seem like they had a psychotic episode. You know what I mean? Like, they seem like they genuinely saw something and it changed their worldview. You know what I mean? Like, it changed the way to me, it's really hard to be dismissive of something like that.
Right.
And everybody will, like, my skeptical friends will say, well, like, anecdotal evidence won't hold up in court. And I'm like, well, we're not in court, first of all.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, second, when it comes to like wildlife, anecdotal evidence has done a lot for wildlife research.
Sure.
Like, the first thing biologists do if you go into like, an unexplored part of Indonesia or a little explored part of Indonesia, or, is go talk to the rice farmers. If I'm looking for a snake in Indonesia, I'm going to go talk to the people who are out barefoot every day, who might get bit by a snake. Like, oh, hey, have you seen this snake with these stripes on it? You know what I mean?
Sure.
Because even if it's not recorded, they're going to say, oh, yeah, I see it over here, So as far as that goes for wildlife, anecdotal evidence holds up. I mean, some of it's crap, you know what I mean? Like the number of people who tell me they've seen crazy things here, in Ohio. Some of it's no good, like some of it is no good, but you just have to use your discretion.
Right.
Other things certainly hold a nugget of truth, if they're not 100% true, they at least hold, so yeah, I mean, like, while anecdotal evidence in a robbery is not great, anecdotal evidence when it comes to wildlife research and stuff does sometimes hold water, you know? So I've just talked to so many people, we were talking a little bit before we started, recording. I'm interested in like the little old ladies that remembered something from their childhood in West Virginia.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, and that actually comes, like, the reason why I say that is it comes from an interaction that I had at the park with someone. Like a little old lady came in and looked at my Ohio map with all the pins in it. I have a park or an Ohio map that it's got pins in it. If somebody had a sighting, they can stick a pin where they saw that, and
cool.
She said, oh, well, West Virginia is not on here, but I found, I had my sighting in West Virginia, and I said, well, you can tell me about it, and she told me that when she was a girl, she grew up in a coal mining town in West Virginia that still had a one-room schoolhouse, and that there was a monkey that would come in for a summer. There was a whole summer that would come in and look through the window and freak everybody out at the schoolhouse. And eventually some of the local men shot the monkey, and she said, it wasn't until she was older and had moved away that she'd heard anything about Bigfoot. You know what I mean?
Right.
And she realized kind of as she got older, well, maybe it was a monkey. You know what I mean? Maybe it was a Bigfoot.
Because back then in West Virginia, what reference would she have?
What reference would you have? Yeah.
There's not like cable television programs about Sasquatch or paranormal.
There's no primates in West Virginia that we're aware of either. No. So for her to be like, I recollect that it was a monkey.
She references.
That's interesting. Though. No, I get it. But what I'm saying is beyond anything, she's okay with it being a monkey. She thinks, okay.
When she was a kid, a kid, see, as she got older, she learned about Bigfoot, you know what I mean?
Makes sense.
And that's
I just think that's really interesting.
Very.
Right. And I talked to Matt Moneymaker once, and I told him that story, and he's like, yeah, I mean, it's a good story, but we don't like to take stories from anybody younger than 12 because it's so easy to like manipulate memories when it comes to kids. You know what I mean? Like, and that's 100% true. Like just playing like the devil's advocate side of things. You know what I mean? Like you can kind of, right. But that story, it stuck with me because it's like, well, why make that up? She didn't seem like that not that she was boring, but she didn't seem like that interesting of a person to make it up. You know what I mean? Like she didn't seem like,
doesn't seem like she's at home spinning yarns like this to herself, like crafting up great Bigfoot stories.
Right.
Yeah, like what you're saying.
And like as far as the monkey thing goes, I mean, I'm sure you guys have seen the historical Bigfoot, the big volume of all the compiled newspaper articles per state. You see that like escaped gorilla. Yes. Presumed escaped gorilla from a circus.
Yes.
Yes. So those things were reported. Those things like that were reported. And I don't know how many gorillas actually escaped from circuses or how many circuses had an actual gorilla.
Yeah, there should have been a lot.
I know, like, right. But I also know quite a bit about, like because one of my other hobbies is sort of related to it. I know quite a bit about like the history of like the carny and stuff.
Yeah.
And like most of the time if a show had a gorilla in it, it was a guy in a suit. You know what I mean? Like it really was a guy in a suit.
Because they weren't messing with a real gorilla.
No, because also you had to feed a gorilla. You were already feeding an elephant. You know what I mean? Like you had to
man, what a terrible job.
A lot of times they didn't. Right. Yeah. so yeah, I mean, if they had monkeys, generally they were like little capuchins that they'd trained to pick pockets and stuff. You know what I mean? They didn't have gorillas, as often. So yeah, I mean, that always cracks me up when it goes down at the end of that, like, escape gorilla rabbit hole.
Yeah.
But yeah, that story, those are the ones that I'm interested in. I can usually pretty much tell when somebody's pulling my leg at the park, you know what I mean? Or not pulling my leg intentionally, but like telling a fib, you know what I mean? When it comes to the Bigfoot stories, and I have no way of vetting every person that tells me a Bigfoot story. I'm busy when I'm working, you know what I mean?
Right.
I've got no way of vetting those stories, but, those like over elaborate stories that come from the guys that only wear the BDU pants and like, you know what I mean? Like,
what's a BDU
like
pants?
the tactical pant, you know what I mean? Like the guys that are the guys that are, you know what I mean? Like the over elaborate stories of those sort of, you know what I mean? Like a lot of times they just seem like no one tells a story like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it just seems like you came up with this. You had one, but even then it seems like something minor might have happened. You know what I mean?
It's the big fish story.
Right. It's the big fish story. That's it. And, and then I'm always skeptical, if somebody sees Bigfoot at the park every time they go out, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Nobody's that lucky.
Bigfoot. Right. No, I mean, I deer hunt and I'm pretty good at deer hunting.
I was just going to say that.
I deer hunt and I'm but there are still seasons when I don't fill a tag.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like there are still deer seasons where I don't fill a tag, And so it happens. Like I'm pretty good at deer hunting, but there are still seasons when I come up empty. You know what I mean? Like, that's how it goes, and, so seeing evidence of Bigfoot every time you go out, you know what I mean? Like I'm always skeptical of that. Like that's your mind seeing what it wants to see.
Right. Paranoia.
You know what I mean? Yeah. And hearing things that you want to hear,
Sure.
To me, it's like, the snow leopards of China or something, like the indigenous people that live in those areas. They'll go years without seeing a snow leopard, but
they're ridiculously hard to film.
Yeah. And they'll tell, like, hey, we know they're here. There's evidence, but we just don't see them
ever.
And that Disney documentary, the snow leopard documentary,
super hard to film.
It was like 5 years or something before they found where that mother was actually, where her den was, before they started shooting anything.
Right.
It was damn near impossible to find that mother.
They're very good at being sneaky and camouflaged, and they don't want you to know where they're at. That's part of that's how they survive.
And presumably, if we're talking about a large bipedal,
great point.
Then probably not gonna want to be filmed. You know what I mean? Because that's one thing that a lot of people will say, like, "Oh, with all the trail cameras out," and I'm like, "Well, I had a bear on my property tear apart a deer feeder last October, like October 2022.
Wow.
We had actually we'd gone away for the weekend, so I decided like my deer feeder was going to run empty because we were going to be gone for like 4 days. So I'm like, well, I'll make sure to give them I poured a bunch of molasses over the corn, just to keep them interested in it and keep them coming back. You know what I mean? The smell will still be there and stuff. And I'm like, and then I'll fill it as soon as I get back to the house, and we'd only been at the house. I think we'd been there less than it was like, we're coming in our first year, I guess. So we came back. We were actually visiting some people up in Erie, PA, and we came back. And I'm like, I stopped at Tractor Supply on my way back, back to the house and got 50 pounds of corn and took it back to the deer feeder and the way back in the woods. And I'm like, the lid's way over in the bushes and the base is gone and the deer feeder is drugged down on the side of the tree. And I'm like, man, the coons here must be huge.
It's an army.
And I start looking around and there's bear prints all around. And I'm like, I got to check my trail camera. My trail camera was literally just on the game trail. 15 feet from not a thing on the trail camera. The bear approached from a different place, tore apart the deer feeder, ate all the molasses corn, and left. You know what I mean? And that's a bear. You know what I mean? That's not a relic hominoid, not a great ape. That's a bear.
Yeah.
So if you've got something presumably with some intelligence, and that's kind of, the running theories. If you keep up with like the running theories about Bigfoot, you've got something that probably has enough intelligence to have some sort of like proto language, not necessarily a language, but like deliberate noises that mean something, you know what I mean? Like there's some sort of sounds and clicks and vowel noise, you know what I mean? Vowel sounds that have like a proto language that isn't just, isn't just instinctual sort of stuff. You kind of have, you have to presume, or assume, I guess you could say, that it's probably pretty intelligent, maybe even intelligent enough to notice that you were putting up a trail camera, you know what I mean? In its territory. And there are trail camera pictures that come up and they usually get torn apart on the internet immediately.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like somebody posts it and people say, well, you can clearly see that it's a suit. You know what I mean?
Right.
So who knows? That's kind of, I've gotten much more comfortable with I don't know since I've been pursuing this subject, I kind of circling back to how I got involved in Bigfoot. I started getting all this evidence, like I started being shown all this evidence and exposed to different ways of thinking about it, talk to people like Dr. Meldrum, one of my volunteers here at here with the park, great guy, local researcher, part of a bunch of different groups. He's kind of one of those guys that doesn't like to throw his hat in with one particular group. So he kind of, likes to be friends with all of them.
That's good.
Great. He was always a great resource. If I had any questions, his name's Dave Wickham. He actually has his own little conference in Coshocton, which is pretty nice. It's nice
cool.
It's a nice little it's back to the basic sort of Bigfoot conference where it was, you know what I mean? The first year that they did it felt really old school and really, it was really well done. You know what I mean? Like it felt, it kind of had that, Bigfoot meeting at a plumbers and pipe fitters hall sort of feel, you know what I mean? It was and it was pretty cool. I was fortunate enough to go help with the first one. And it was great. I gotta make it a point to go to another one. I haven't been able to in the last 2 years because it's fallen on the weekend of my anniversary, and that's my wife puts up with an awful lot as it is.
Right.
I bet.
Ours too.
Ours too.
I know what you mean.
Right.
But so that conference is more of kind of your traditional informational conference where you don't have a bunch of vendors and other things going on and all this kind of like a hubbub. Like it's more of a focused speakers
more
and researchers
streamlined.
are getting together to network. So
it was great. It was really cool. It was really well done. He exposed me to a lot of different evidence and stuff too. You know what I mean? Like it gave me resources. And my cynicism about it started to wane a lot. And I was looking at it by 2018. I was looking at it I was at the point where I was like, there's got to be something to some of this. You know what I mean? By 2018,
smelling the smoke from the fire a little bit.
Right. Yeah, that's it. I always say I drank the Flavor Aid in 2018. You know what I mean? Like that was, but yeah, the
Flavor Aid.
Well, you got to be accurate.
The generic Kool-Aid. Yeah.
Yeah.
Generic Kool-Aid, yo.
I love it.
But so a couple of things happened in 2018. Now, whenever anybody asks me point blank if I've seen Bigfoot, the answer is no. Right. I have not. If they ask the right question, I will tell them the right answer. Like if they ask if I've ever experienced anything, that's a different story. You know what I mean?
Sure.
That's a different story. I will not come right out and say, because as soon as I say if they ask, have you ever seen Bigfoot? And I say, well, no, but I had then, this is just a product of working with the public day in and day out for my entire adult life. You know what I mean?
Yep.
I've been a public educator for my entire adult life. That's the only, aside from a bartending gig here and there and stuff like that. This has been my job. My whole adult life has been public education. I worked for a couple of other organizations before I worked for the state. So I've always worked with the public, and you find things that if here's a good example, not to get too abstract or anything, but I have my taxidermied bobcat at the park. Like my bobcat is very scrawny and very small. You know what I mean? So every person that comes into the nature center and sees the bobcat, they see it and they go, "That's an awful small bite." And I said, "Yeah, it's just a young one. It was small and scrawny." "Yeah, the ones we see on the trail cams at our place are huge compared to that." And I said, "Yeah, they get bigger." "Yeah, that's an awful small bite. That came from around here." And I'm like, the thing is once that's the thing is like the thing that they take home from that is Salt Fork has small bobcats. You know what I mean? Like that's the thing, because that's what they latch on to.
People are,
you know what I mean? So the second that I say, as soon as somebody says like, "Have you seen Bigfoot?" And I go, "Well, no," but then they latch on to, the butt. Like they latch onto that.
They lose everything before that, but
right. So I always preface this by saying, like, I've never seen Bigfoot, and I have no evidence that what the things that I've experienced were actually Bigfoot. But when my wife and I were first dating, she's from Canton. Like, she's a Canton folk. You know what I mean? Like, and here at Salt Fork, that's most of my visitors are like Canton, Akron, and Cleveland. You know what I mean? Because 77 comes right down. We're 6 miles from 77. So,
okay.
So most of my visitors, so like, when we first started dating, I would go up there and we'd go see live music, go to whatever, an art show, you know what I mean? Go do things like that, whatever, like a microbrew, you know what I mean? Like we'd go do things like that. And then when she would come down here, I would take her squirrel hunting because it's Appalachia and that's how you date. You know what I mean? Like that's, and it would have been like October 2018. I'd taken her out squirrel hunting, it was a nice fall day. And, we were out and heard this long, loud, mournful howl, and I mean, long, and you could kind of feel it in your chest, and, she looked at me and she said, "Well, what was that?" And I said, I don't know. And I'm pretty good at animal noises. Like I always joke that I speak fluent owl. You know what I mean? Like I can call in owls and stuff, and coyotes and things like that. So I know, at least in Ohio, if you drop me in Utah, it might be a different story, or British Columbia, it might be a different story. But like in Ohio, I know what the noise that most animals are going to make during different parts of their life cycle. You know what I mean? Like I know those noises, and I used to teach ornithology at Hocking College. Like I taught a quarter of ornithology at Hocking College. I'm really good with bird calls. I've got a great memory bank for bird calls. Like I do more identification by ear than I do through binoculars every spring.
Sure.
So it was nothing that I had heard out in the woods. It was nothing that I had, knew of, as far as that goes. No known animal that I knew, So we get back to the car and we're heading home, and she's like YouTubing coyote noises and stuff. And I said, "Hey, YouTube the Ohio howl." And she pulls up the Ohio howl and, presses play. And she goes, "Oh, hey, that sounds just like it. What was that?" And I'm like, "Well, allegedly that's a Bigfoot."
Yeah.
And of course she's like, "Oh, bullshit." Like, of course she's like, and I'm like, "No, like allegedly that's a, I'm telling, that's like one of the great pieces of evidence is the Ohio howl. And that's from Columbiana, it's from Columbiana County, now the caveat to that is Salt Fork is incredibly popular with Bigfoot researchers.
Yeah.
Every single weekend through the summer, there's a group out there looking for Bigfoot every single weekend. There are groups from PA, there are groups from all around Ohio, there are groups from other states that come in. You know what I mean? I have no way of knowing that there wasn't a guy on the next ridgeline over with a Bluetooth speaker up on a tripod, blaring the same recording that my wife looked up. You know what I mean?
That's interesting.
I've got no way. Yeah, like I have no way, trying to elicit a response, because they do that. Like we've done it on Bigfoot hikes. So I try to look at it from as many different angles, as I can. But that certainly did end the rest of my cynicism about the subject. You know what I mean? That little experience, that's all I can say, is that something made that noise and I don't know what it was. You know what I mean? That did end the rest of my cynicism, and I started being much more open to the idea of what people might be experiencing and that sort of thing. Okay. So once I got onto that, the Bigfoot hikes became much more interesting to me. I started listening to the people that wanted to tell stories. And then kind of went on that way through 2019. And then 2020, well, you know, the world ground to a halt that spring. And you know, it was really weird for us, like the naturalists, like, you know, being kind of the educators at our places, and really weird for me because while I really missed talking to people, I also just loved that I was home, you know, all the time with my kids. And
right,
you know, we had an awesome garden that year and stuff, you know what I mean? Like we did all kinds of projects and things around around our house at the time.
Sure.
And but you know, it was really weird. I was really sweating it as far as the job goes, because I was like, man, we're not doing public education like this. You know what I mean? Like you know, am I going to have a job? Like, are things like, where is this going?
Yeah.
And we like everyone else, we switched to virtual stuff. You know what I mean? Like, yep. You know, and we started doing these little videos. And I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it at first because it was, you know, I was able to like kind of channel that inner Steve Irwin. I would do a video about a snapping turtle, and I'd be on my belly next to a swamp. Yes. You know what I mean? With the snapping turtle right there. Like I just found it, even though I'd found it a week before, and I was just waiting for a good weather day. You know what I mean? Like, you know, it was like you were finding it with me. You know, I'd turn over a log and there'd be a snake, and, you know, you didn't know that I'd put the snake under the log right before I hit record. You know what I mean? Like that, you know, that sort of thing, which is totally what Steve Irwin did too. Don't tell anybody, but that's, you know what I mean? Like, but you know, so it was kind of cool. I do these little like 5-minute creature features and talk about, you know, whatever animal. And they were great. I wasn't thinking too hard on it. It was fun. You know what I mean? I was kind of getting into it because it was also hard for me. I can kind of read a room, you know, I know how to like read a room pretty well, like, and know where to steer a program or a talk or a lecture. You know what I mean? I know how to steer it one way that I want it to go, sure, based on my audience. Because that is one of the cool things about being an educator in this capacity, not being a teacher per se, but like being an educator in this sort of informal education, is that you don't do the same program. It can be the same program, but you're never doing the same program twice. You know what I mean? Like, you know, you might do a geology talk 4 times, you know, in a month or whatever, but it's never the same geology talk.
There's no structure, like, syllabus or
no.
Yeah, you do it however you feel.
And it's not, well, that, and also your audience dictates a lot of it.
Yeah,
you know what
absolutely.
I mean? Like your audience dictates so much of it. You know, I might have a bunch of Boy Scouts that are trying to earn their geology merit badge, and they ask the really hard questions.
Yeah.
But then when we start talking about fossils, you know, next week I might have a bunch of people in like, say, knee-length denim skirts who maybe aren't going to be that interested in fossils and geologic time and stuff because the like, you know what I mean? Like, sure, you're going to have like, and I gotta be aware of that. Like, I gotta notice that, oh, well, maybe we steer clear of the whole evolution thing today. You know what I mean? That sort of thing. So, you know, changing from that to like talking to a camera, you know, and not really knowing, you know, I remember doing a pollinator program, you know, virtual pollinator program, and I felt like Ricky Bobby, and I was like, I don't know what to do with my hand. You know what I mean? Like, I don't like, you know, and it was you know, it was really awkward. So we kind of go through that for a while, and then October rolled around, and I was asked to do a Bigfoot talk for Halloween. You know what I mean? Like a Bigfoot program. And that was kind of the first of that series that I wound up doing.
Yeah.
After that, things got very weird. I started appearing on podcasts and stuff. And people started asking me what my opinion was about Bigfoot, you know. And here's the thing is like, I want to believe in Bigfoot so bad. I want it to be real so bad. Like, I want to see a Bigfoot so bad. And I think that probably handicaps my chances of seeing a Bigfoot quite a bit. Is that the desire, you know what I mean? Probably
the more you want it, the less you're going to get it. Yep.
Yeah, right. But I did these videos, and one of them I wanted to do kind of a Finding Bigfoot Salt Fork thing. You know what I mean? Like, so I went out and camped at our group camp, which had been vacant for, you know, like more than a year at that point because of COVID and everything. Mm-hmm. So I went and camped, And that night I got two wood knocks, which I don't know what wood knocks are. When you ask my actual opinion about wood knocks, I don't think that I always challenge people who talk about wood knocks to go out and find a piece of wood lying on the ground that's suitable to whack against another tree and make that hollow, like baseball bat sort of sound. You know what I mean? Like most times if you find a log and you smash it against a tree, it's going to blow apart because it's all punky. And you know what I mean?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So that's where we have a friend that has an alternate theory on it's not actually a wood knock. They think it's I don't like a knock with a tongue. But from the skull and cavity of a giant creature. Right. And that's my opinion too, is that it's mechanical. Mm-hmm. It's a vocal, you know what I mean? Like that it's not not like that.
Like an orca communicating. Yeah. Almost.
And there's also, if you go back into some of the records, like into some of the BFRO, records, there's very few witness reports of people of something of one of these presumed creatures holding anything, let alone a stick, or a rock or anything, you know what I mean? I also think it's like some sort of mechanism that they that they can produce, but I got that. Don't know what it was, you know what I mean? Not a Bigfoot, not a smoking gun. But that definitely, did a lot to change my opinions about things. So that kind of brings me to what I do now with the Bigfoot naturalist thing. I'm in a position where I'm like kind of a classically trained naturalist. You know what I mean? Like I've got a formal background in this. I'm a field person, so I'm out in the field a lot. I'm nowhere near. I've got an associate's degree. I'm not an academic at all. You know what I mean? I'm a field taught person, and I went to a 2-year technical school. I went to Hocking College. And I teach at a 2-year technical school in the fall. I teach botany over here at Zane State. You know what I mean? Because I'm a field person, and that's what technical schools need, are field people. You know what I mean? So with the Bigfoot naturalist stuff, I'm in kind of a unique position, not only to get people out and interested in nature and stuff like that, but I'm also in a unique position to give what, based on all the evidence and based on what research, maybe the best and most reasonably thought out, like present the ideas that the academics, like that, Dr. Meldrum and Cliff and, the Sasquatch Tracks guys, you know what I mean? Micah and those guys, like those, Matt Pruitt, like those ideas and the evidence that is like the most reasonable and, the most grounded, I am able to, present that in a way now where it's maybe taken seriously by people, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I love that.
And that's kind of what I use. I try to use this position, and try to use my background and stuff to get people out there and get people interested, and also like test their critical thinking with it. Like, I mean, and I always like to point out like the idea of like biological precedence for some of the things that we attribute to Bigfoot is really important to me. I mean, I've had discussions with people about like fluid-filled hairs that blur their outline. Oh, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, which is a great thought. Like, it's a great thought. Like the idea that you can like, that you can like inject, you know what I mean? You've got hollow hair that you can like inject fluid into to blur your out. Like, that's a great idea.
The camouflage.
Yeah. But the thing is, there's not really a biological precedence for it. You know what I mean?
Well, that's really cool, John, because, we always talk about multiple disciplines when it comes to anything.
Yeah.
We're big into Ohio history, and, there's researchers, but there's the archaeologists and all these people that need to come together to really understand true history. And the researchers, the Bigfooters, if you will, they're not necessarily a biologist or a naturalist or trained.
They could be varied backgrounds.
And multiple disciplines to study this stuff is so important.
Right. Yeah, it is. And that's what I try to use this, that's why it's the Bigfoot naturalist, because if I'm asked flat out if I'm a researcher, I'm not.
Yeah.
I spend so much more time out looking for snakes and stuff. I do education, and I do education, it's not only like my day job that we were talking about with, I do education elsewhere. I'm talking to you guys. I'm hoping to maybe do some writing eventually. Like I said, I've got four kids, so it's kind of hit or miss when I can, pencil that in.
Yeah.
But, and do things. I'd love to do videos kind of on my own, and things like that. But I try to use this position because people do take me seriously, and I take this subject seriously. That's the thing, is that I actually do take this subject seriously. I don't think it's a joke any longer. And even if it's, I think what like Bobcat Goldthwait, I think he said, if you if you go look for Bigfoot, you might accidentally go camping. That's the only downside. You know what I mean? Like that's true. You know what I mean?
It's a great
like you
joke.
might accidentally, yeah, right. So I started to take this subject much more seriously and kind of get more immersed in it and trying to use my position to present the best available evidence and the most reasonable, in my opinion. You know what I mean?
Sure.
That's kind of what I try to rely on, is the most reasonable evidence, and I try to steer clear of anything that maybe doesn't anything too supernatural. And like we were talking about before we got on, there are things where I don't know. You know what I mean?
Sure.
There's weirdness out there that I don't know. I really don't. But there are some things where I'm like, well, that sounds really cool, but there's no biological precedence for it. There's no evidence that anything else does that. At least with like when they talk about like infrasound. When they talk about people getting zapped with infrasound, well, at least there are animals that do that. You know what I mean? Like there are mammals at least that have infrasound. You know what I mean? That can produce infrasound. As far as I know, there aren't any mammals that can actively change their color. You know what I mean? Or blur their background. Now they can change seasonally. Like you've got weasels and stuff that will change, turn white in the winter.
Yeah.
But that's not the same. So there's not, with the infrasound thing, well, like maybe they do produce infrasound. I don't know, because there's at least biological precedence for it. But I also think, you mentioned Ohio history. The historical side of it's so fascinating that every tribe, every culture in North America, every culture in most of the world has something that's kind of analogous to Bigfoot. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like it's some degree of Bigfoot, but almost every culture in North America has some sort of legend that if you really kind of, you don't really have to think too hard to make it fit into the Bigfoot, category. Right. And one of the things, like you look at totem poles that depicted, alleged Bigfoot. Why is it so far-fetched that like, so you've got a totem pole that has all known animals on it, you know what I mean? And then they'd stick one fictional animal,
right?
Just for fun. They thought they'd just spice
just
it
for
up.
Fun,
yeah.
Right?
It's a myth.
Yeah, right.
It's part of their myth.
Just to throw us off later in life when we came to ruin their culture.
Well, it's just part of their religious
part of their
belief,
or their, and that's what it is.
Mythos.
But, that's the one made up animal. Right. You know what I mean? That they threw, or anything like that. Like,
and they all have different names. They all have different names.
They all have different names. But also like
pictographs.
And sometimes, there's at least evidence that sometimes there's there's an oral history that gets passed on that into modern times. If you look at like all of the stuff surrounding Homo floresiensis, like the on the Isle of Flores,
we still talk about that one.
I've got my theories.
Right. Well, but you see all that. Well, those tribes were telling stories about a little goblin. I mean, like that. You know what I mean? Like they were So, and there's proof that there was an overlap between modern humans and them for a while.
Right.
So now, did they persist into modern times, or did the folklore persist into modern times?
Right.
Like that's the, that's what, right. That's what but it's sort of hard to look at North America and say like, well, that's Indonesia, but North America, we know every animal that's out there. You know what I mean? Right. I mean,
I don't think we do.
Even on a micro scale, if you look at like, I have been wrong plenty of times, but like the biggest like slap in the face that I've ever had for years. I'm going on my 11th year with ODNR. I mean, for years at Salt Fork, I was telling people we don't have copperheads because we don't. You know what I mean? For all intents and purposes, we don't. Northern copperheads. I always said like, well, the last record was from the 50s for this county. Lots of disturbances happened since the 50s. We don't have copperheads, you know. Last spring, I'm out looking at a place north of the park, on park property. I look down at a rock. I go, oh, that's a really snaky looking rock. I'm going to turn it over. First northern copperhead I have ever seen in Guernsey County. Under that rock. So now I can no longer say we don't have copperheads. You know what I mean? Like, because I found a copperhead. I've got photographic evidence of a copperhead. You know what I mean? I put it on the county record. Like, I updated the county record with it, you know? And so there are things that, you know, we can't just say, and that's what I'm saying. Like, you know, the Isle of Flores, you can say that and people go, well, yeah, that's Indonesia. You know, but this is North America. And it's like, well, yeah, but every culture had a thing, you know, including modern cultures. We have a thing, you know what I mean? Right. Like, we have a folklore. Well, I don't think that we always appreciate that we are participating in modern folklore, you know? And it's part, you know, now, like, what if this, you know, what if your podcast gets, you know, unearthed, you know, 500 years from now, and they figure out how to, you know, like, you know, they're going to say, well, look, these primitive people, they were just learning how to use digital stuff. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like they, you know, they didn't know, you know what I mean? They didn't know that there were these things living out there. You know what I mean? Like, that sort of thing. Like, they, you know, but I don't think that we can appreciate like the essence of like what that subject is, what Bigfoot is, you know what I mean? What the subject of Bigfoot and Bigfoot research is sometimes. No, I mean, like, you can, of course, you go way, way off. You can go off into the woo, and no disrespect to the woo either. I don't have any disrespect for that. It's just like I always say, like, it says naturalist on my shirt, not supernaturalist. You know, it's the Bigfoot naturalist. Like, I try to stick with nuts and bolts, flesh and blood, you know, undiscovered great ape. You know, that's kind of the running theory that at least a lot of the academics kind of, you know, or a lot of the folks who research the subject that are, you know, I think the best researchers, at least, it kind of go with, you know what I mean? Yeah,
but you can agree that there are stories where there is some high strangeness and weird things around Bigfoot and sightings that, you know, sometimes are hard to.
There we go.
There you go.
Good. All right. Sorry,
you know, they seem kind of woo woo, but when you look at the person that's telling you this, and it's not some like hippie smoking dope. It's somebody that's highly respected, or even a police officer, like the
little old lady,
the little old lady.
Unless she's smoking it for glaucoma.
You know, there's like, you know, UAP stuff and weird things. You know, the new Politis documentary, the UFO connection. Oh, yeah. And that's some of those stories in there are very, very interesting.
And, you know, one of the things, actually, I've got my own little pet theory about like the UFO Bigfoot connection. Yeah. You know what I mean? When people have like, you know, when there are reports that coincide with, you know, UAP, UFO sightings and Bigfoot sightings, you know what I mean? I think we're naturally inclined to think like, obviously the Bigfoot climbed off the UFO. You know what I mean? Yeah. I think that's not really how I feel about it. I feel like if this thing exists, you know what I mean? We can assume that it's intelligent enough to stay off trail cameras, to not get hit by cars. You know what I mean? We can assume that it's well aware of what's happening in its home range. You know what I mean? If there's a big bright flash of light in the sky, it's probably going to look up and go, what was that? Maybe I see, could that be fire over there? I'm going to go investigate. And then it happens to cross the road in front of somebody that goes, oh my God, what was that in the sky? Is that a fire over there? And then they see a Bigfoot, you know what I mean? Right. Presumably, like I would assume that some of those reports of maybe aren't a supernatural Bigfoot. It's a Bigfoot going like, holy cow, what was that? Yeah. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like, what was that I just, what was that big bright flash?
Like we would, exactly
well, just like we would,
if
right?
we were out there camping.
Or like really any other animal would go, would either run from it or investigate it. You know what I mean? Those are the two options, you know?
So kind of like Bigfoot is there at the same, like simultaneously as a UFO UAP is happening.
Experience.
Yeah. What I'm saying
I mean,
is
that's
like
a roulette wheel of like, I mean, that's hitting two bingo squares at once.
No, right. But you know, there's all those stories about like the you know what I mean? There's lots of, and people have cross-referenced them, you know what I mean? Like looked at like MUFON reports and BFRO reports and cross-referenced the ones that happened on the same night at the same location, you know what I mean? Or in the same general area, and use that as evidence to say they're extraterrestrial, which I do not, you know, I don't think that there's any evidence of that. But I do think that maybe if, say, a Bigfoot was like happened out across the road, maybe it wasn't paying attention to the fact that it was like highly visible, you know what I mean? Because it was focused on whatever just happened in the sky. You know what I mean?
Good point.
That sort of thing. Yeah, right.
I think maybe the UFOs are like tracking the Bigfoots, just like, you know, you hear the reports of them picking up the cattle or mutilating this. Like maybe the UFOs are just out there maintaining the Bigfoots too.
Well, I mean, I like do you guys know the Cryptid of the Corn?
Oh yeah.
Justin and Jay are buddies of ours.
Good guys.
I like their, you know, their mushroom like nitrates, you know, idea. Like, you know, I like maybe Bigfoot likes nitrates, you know,
right?
Could be. You know, like but no, but yeah, I don't know. I just think I try to use this position as responsibly as possible. Like, I try not to get too lost in the weeds, you know, when it comes to like this stuff. I mean, sometimes I'll overthink things, you know. Like I had a whole conversation with Dr. Meldrum once a couple of years ago about like, I'm like, you know, so part of the reason why for most of human history, infant mortality was so high is because our bodies, as we became bipedal and our brains got bigger and our heads got bigger, our bodies didn't catch up quite quick enough to deal with our big brains and big shoulders. And like our pelvis didn't form there, you know what I mean? And we had a lot of complicated, like, you know, childbirth wipes us out for a while. You know what I mean? As opposed to a quadruped, you know, or a four-legged animal that has a baby and then goes right on about its business. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like it had, you know, a deer can just
That's an interesting theory. That's interesting.
So I was like, it would make sense that if there's another bipedal animal out there, that maybe they have a high instance of like not only like maternal mortality, but also, you know, infant mortality, right? You know, I'm like, it would make sense. Like their hips and stuff can't be, you know what I mean? Like, or are they more like adapted than us? You know what I mean? I'm like, so it would, I was trying to say like, you know, so there has to be some sort of like actual nesting, you know, like an actual nursery where you have, you know what I mean? And Dr. Meldrum was kind of basically pointing out the big flaw in that is that we don't know enough about any of this to presume any of that. And that was the big, so I will, just like everybody else, I will overthink things all the way through, you know what I mean? To the very last thread, I will overthink it.
It's fun.
You got to theorize.
Because that's 100% true. What he said was like, well, we don't have enough evidence to prove, you know, to say one way or the other. And I'm like, well, but my opinion would be like, just thinking on it, you know, like I said, getting lost in that rabbit hole is like, well, there have to be some sort of nursery, right? Because like you got a bipedal animal with big old shoulders, you know what I mean? And probably a big old head, you know what I mean? Probably not easy for the, you know, mother. So there'd have to be some sort of recuperation, you know what I mean? Which I mean, and there are nest sites that people have reported, you know.
Those are weird.
So,
or maybe they're not that big of a birth, you know. Maybe they don't have that big of a, you know, actual offspring.
Maybe
and maybe
really
they
small.
Pick up and gestate really quickly afterwards and grow really fast afterwards.
Yeah,
that could also be true.
You'd have to look at more like just primates in general, I guess, to get some kind of basis or mammals.
I'm not, you know, I'm not a primatologist. I'm not. I try to, but I try not to spout that stuff when I'm like talking to the public. You know.
Oh yeah, sure. No,
guys, but like what I try to do. My main goal is like people. I take it seriously.
Yes.
With my background and stuff, people take me seriously. I try to be articulate. You know. It's been. I mean, in August, I'm already on autopilot. I'm pretty much peopled out by August. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'm down to, grunting my way through the day, at this point, but I try to be articulate, and I try to meet people where they're at.
Sure.
And I think, I think this is I think it's a worthwhile, pursuit, like educating people about this and trying to present the best evidence.
Sure.
And trying to remain visible and being, I'm not like, boost my own ego or anything, but trying to remain as some sort of touchstone, you know what I mean, for this subject, you know what I mean? Like where I'm not a researcher, like I'm not on a TV show, you know what I mean? I don't spend a lot of time, but I will listen to your story. I will discuss theories with you. I will try to educate people about it. I try to remain visible and open to the subject.
Mm-hmm.
And I also try to take it as seriously as possible. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I do spend a lot of time and I've gotten to know some people, I've gotten really great friends through this subject, it's been great for me and my family too. I mean, that's most of our vacations now are kind of, to conferences, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like we kind of, we'll spend one day at a you know what I mean? That's so all my kids go to school wearing, cryptid stuff. Like we got lots of
mine too.
And my house is like decorated with Jonathan Dodd and stuff. You know what I mean? Like I've got all kinds of, so yeah, I mean, I've gotten to know a lot of great people and it's been really good for us. But you said, Micah called me out at CryptidCon. So I met Micah in a really weird way. I met the Sasquatch Tracks guys in a really weird way. So I came out with those videos, and the reason why Micah called me out was the subject of his talk was Bigfoot and the government.
Yes.
At CryptidCon, and about his active hobby of FOIA requests and public records requests,
Oh, he's so dialed in with that stuff.
Oh man, he's so good at it. He's so good.
He's got the receipts.
Yeah, right. Yeah, he's so good at it. And actually, so the way we met, I had been listening to Sasquatch Tracks, so it was kind of one I found them and I'm like, well, these guys are really level about it. And like they pursue it, or they pursue it and they ask questions in a way that I can really appreciate. You know what I mean? And I think they vet their guests really well, but so I'd been listening to it and was aware of I was also aware of who Micah Hanks was through his other projects, the 7 Ages and the Micah Hanks program and stuff, but I'd been listening to Sasquatch Tracks at the time and I'd come out with the videos and I was actually at home one day. I was getting ready for work. I was shaving in my bathroom, getting ready for work, and my phone rang, and it was my personal phone. But it was the Naturalist supervisor in Columbus. And when they call 8 o'clock in the morning, it's usually no bueno. You know what I mean?
So
obviously I answered. Yeah, right. So I answered it and I'm like, hey, what's up? How's it going? You know what I mean? And she kind of went yeah, so we don't really know what to do with this. We got a public records request. And I'm like, oh God. I'm like, it can't be anything that I don't spend any money. You know what I mean? It's not like I don't know I don't even have a budget. You know what I mean? I don't know what on earth could they be requesting from me, thinking somebody's, because anybody can ask for what purchases did I make this year? You know what I mean? So I'm thinking the worst possible things. I'm like, oh my, what am I? And she said, no, it's nothing like that. It's Bigfoot. And I'm like, oh. And she said, somebody wants to know all of the everything that we have, reports, everything that we have on Bigfoot, ODNR. They want to know what the Department of Natural Resources has on Bigfoot. And I'm like, ooh, well, I mean, do we have to? Because that was news to me. I'm like, do we have anything on Bigfoot? Well, no, we don't have it. Nobody takes report. We don't take reports on that. You know what I mean? That's one thing that people don't understand is that not everything is a report,
Mm-hmm.
If I stop and help somebody change a tire, it's not a report. You know
right.
what I mean?
Sorry, ma'am. Let me get my paper.
Yeah. Right. But so she said, can I send it to you? And I said, well, yeah, if you send it to me, maybe I can just see what they want. and see if, I'm like, most likely they saw the videos and they're just, well, he hadn't seen the videos, but I read through it and it's like this amazingly well-written public records request, and down at the bottom is all his contact information. It's Micah Hanks. So I call her back and I'm like, hey, I listened to a couple of his podcasts. Can I call him? Like, can I just call him up? So I called him and we talked and we exchanged, what I knew and what I had and things like that. And we became really close. And actually after I met Micah, I got to know Smokey and Jeff, who are the kind of the other two in the Sasquatch Tracks, gang. And I spend a lot of time chatting with Smokey. Actually, right before we got on, we were texting back and forth because I was talking about how bad my lighting is here.
Looks good,
but yeah, but the yeah. So like I got to be really close with them last summer. I went down for a couple of days, hung out with Smokey and Jeff. We went out looking for rattlesnakes and stuff. It was
dude,
it's pretty cool. Yeah. So
no, thank you. Unless you, so I'd go with you, but I wouldn't go by myself. I'm afraid I would step on one.
Yeah, but we, so it's, and it is a really like for all of its fault, and every community has its faults. Like every subset of society has its, faults, and it has its overly, vocal kind of. Like I said before, the wackiest theories tend to be the most vocal. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But I think the Bigfoot community is sort of unique in that realm of research. I think it's pretty open. Also, if you look at like the demographic of people who come to there's not like the Venn diagram for Bigfoot conferences is all over the place. You know what I mean? Like,
good point.
You have, like. Really, somebody should do like a sociological study on. You know what I mean?
Would love to see that done.
There's actually a guy
that studies Sasquatch.
The people that love Sasquatch.
now I say that there's actually a guy in Wales who is doing that. He interviewed me last year. Interviewed a ton of people.
Oh wow!
So there is a guy that's actually doing that. There's
very cool.
Who's interested in in the U.S. the people who believe in Bigfoot, or the people who research Bigfoot.
Sure.
So, but I mean, so I guess there is a guy that did that, but the it's just it's an interesting thing, and I try to keep that in mind. Like, am I doing justice to the community? You know what I mean? Like to the Bigfoot community.
Sure.
Like I don't, because you also get that, like you get the curmudgeonly people who are like, oh, I used to go to the conferences and stuff, and I don't listen to any of those podcasts. And you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, you do kind of get those like curmudgeons that are like, but I try to do justice to the community and try to give, like I said, the best evidence as possible.
Yeah, man. I think
absolutely.
you validate the kind of the scene as a whole when someone like yourself,
right? And the pursuit of it. I think, you know what I mean. That maybe it is, even if. I mean, you still got to prove that it's not real. You know what I mean? Like, so even the pursuit of, you know what I mean? Like,
well, it's almost legitimizes at least the conversation.
Right. The conversation. That's it.
I think it's a legitimate conversation for sure.
A lot of people don't believe it is.
Well, okay, then that's for people that, again, think they know everything.
You're a silly person.
They're right and you're wrong. And
you're a silly. I had a family member tell me that I was silly to even think about UAPs and extraterrestrials that, well, just because there's a congressional hearing, everybody in Congress lies. All these whistleblowers, they're all liars. It's this or it's that. But I'm like, to me, with what's happening with the UAP stuff, it's just like where there's smoke, there's fire. Like, I'm not going to say I haven't seen an alien body myself. But when you have someone like Grush and as hard as they're going after him, and trying to discredit his
character, like
that's a playbook. So is there something there? But to say you're silly when there's congressional hearings, I didn't even watch that. That's silly. That's for kids.
Right.
Well,
no, it's not. It's not. Like if they had the same congressional hearings for Sasquatch or talking about, Bigfoot or going, hey, we've got John Hickenbottom from the Ohio DNR here at Congress. Dude, you get up there and start doing that. That'd be so amazing if that happened.
Oh my God.
I'd be like, I know him kind of. I sat behind him. I sat behind him.
I'm going to have a stress dream about that tonight. That's God.
Oh man, that's too funny.
yeah, no, I also agree. And, and like we said before, there's no shortage of strangeness that you just don't know what it is, you just don't know. And like Mike and I have talked before, like the more you pursue this stuff, the more comfortable you have to be with, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Well, do you also think the more you pursue it, the more it kind of like like your grasp is still exceeded, like what you're reaching for still keeps going further. You don't necessarily get there, but it grows.
And I don't get into the woo stuff.
Sure, but I mean, I
can't appreciate like the John Keel ideas. You know what I mean? Like how John Keel had ideas that, because he had these ideas like UFO activity would pick up when he'd go investigate, because he was like whipping up everybody's subconscious. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like asking questions and I like that idea. I don't know. You know what I mean? I don't think but I think that we certainly, if we want to find weirdness, we can find it. Yeah. You know what I mean? Out there. And sometimes unintentionally, you know what I mean? Find it. We can stumble across. So I think when you're pursuing these weird things, these weird subjects, like you're going to find weirdness, you're going to find strangeness. And, I don't know. Yeah.
At the same time, what Tobias Wayland was talking to us about was when you kind of look into John Keel and the Mothman Prophecies, the book, he had so many pages to fill up that if you just had the Mothman story,
it wasn't that much.
There was no book worth.
There was a story, but it wasn't a full.
So Keel had to grab all this other stuff, whether it was the Men in Black, and the Silver Bridge was like, that's my ending. He didn't have an ending to the book.
Yeah, he kind of pulled a lot of elements together to make that entire story.
Because he had the Mothman, that whole story that had been included in another work, right? Just the Mothman stuff. Yeah, no, I agree. I also agree with that.
Yeah,
and I think fun. I can also admire John Keel.
Us too.
I love John Keel stuff. Yeah,
and his like perspicacity, because he would investigate just anything. If you said it was a flying toaster, I saw it on the freeway, he'd go investigate it. You know what I mean? Like he would. And I can admire that. And he was also friends with like somebody that I would love if I could meet one Bigfoot researcher from the past, Ivan Sanderson. Like he was a zoologist, he was a naturalist, he was articulate. Like he's everything that every naturalist wants to be. He just also believed in Loch Ness Monster and Bigfoot and stuff. Nice. You know what I mean? Like he was,
why not?
He was like and he and John Keel, John Keel would like go decompress on his farm sometimes.
Wow.
Ivan T. Sanderson's farm. They were close. So I would love to, meet Ivan T. Sanderson. And he got fooled, by a hoaxer in Florida. There were these penguin prints that showed up on a beach in Florida. Huge, he estimated to be a 9-foot tall penguin. You know what I mean?
Gee.
And and it turned out to be a guy who made them out of lead. He made some big penguin feet out of lead. And he was just kind of pranking people. You know what I mean? But like, so penguin? we're all so right.
Why a penguin? First of all,
who knows?
Well, actually, I mean, there were actually some of the sci-fi from the time. This was 40s, 50s. Some of the sci-fi at the time, like you had like Weird Encounters and Strange Tales and stuff. Like H.P. Lovecraft wrote about giant penguins. It was kind of a popular thing to throw around. You know what I mean? And science fiction for the time was like giant megafauna that's small megafauna in reality. Funny. You know what I mean? So like penguins. Yeah, so that's probably where the guy got the idea. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But we all can fall victim to that. And like I said, I myself included, like I have no way of knowing that the thing that I heard out at Salt Fork might have been a recording with a Bluetooth speaker. Yeah, right.
That's a good point.
I would agree with like Mark DeWorth. You guys know that you've met
Mark from DeWorth, Ohio Bigfoot Conference.
But yeah, Salt Fork, I think, might be considered overfished sometimes.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like there might be so much activity out there, people looking, that it might negatively impact.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Moving on.
Yeah, not that I don't want people to come out to the park. That's not what I'm saying. You know what I mean? I'm just saying, like, and I don't think that I don't think that there's evidence that if this animal exists, I don't think there's evidence that they live in one place all the time. You know what I mean? I think they definitely are migratory.
Yep.
and they run on like they're cyclical, you know. And I think that Salt Fork probably, I certainly have, you know, seen trends of like years that are people see all kinds of things, experience all kinds of things, and then years where there's almost nothing that happens. You know, this year in particular, like there hasn't been that much that has happened this year.
Yeah.
And even the one like really interesting story, I don't know how I feel about it. Like we did have somebody say that their camper got rocked back and forth pretty violently one night, and I'm, you know, I don't know how I feel about that one. They said, oh, there are no footprints or anything, and I'm like, well, I feel like if your camper was being violently rocked back and forth, it'd be a smudge or something on the side. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know how I feel about it, but I mean, it was a story. Yeah. You know, that's.
Do you think there are people that? Sorry to interrupt you. Do you think there are people that have like Bigfoot hotspots that they don't tell people about, just so that they don't have the problem that you're saying of where it's like, I don't want every Tom, Dick, and Harry out there disturbing the Sasquatch that I think is out there. Yeah, because again, if you're trying to do legit, you know, kind of research or, you know, figuring out what's going on, you don't want to tell everybody under the sun and then
let anybody know.
And I'm sure there is. You know what I mean? I'm sure there are people that have their own special, you know, their own, you know, sweet spot like that, you know, here in my part of Ohio, like your morel patch.
I was going to ask you about that earlier.
Yeah, you don't tell no one where your morel patch is. You know what I mean?
I was going to ask you about that earlier. I was going to I want to go to your property and hunt morels, and I'll give you like half of the weight that I find. But I know you got morels out there. I know you got morels.
Yeah, we got morels.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, we you know, you don't tell no one where you're.
You don't.
Where your morel patch. So it's the same thing. Like you don't, you know, your special fishing hole. You don't tell anybody that. You know.
John, what's one of the most convincing stories that you've heard recently, other than the, you know, shaking of the? Is there one that sticks out that's just like very interesting, falls into the I don't know category, but is kind of raises your
there's one eyebrow. There's one now. I've told it before, but it did stick with me. Like it was one of the ones that really changed my opinion on some of the things. There is one, and like I said, I've told it other places, but you know, that's there was a guy that came out to the park with his wife, and his wife was doing that sort of like, no, he'll listen to you. Go tell him. He was just like forcing it. You know what I mean? Forcing him to tell me the story.
Yeah.
And he was a nice guy in his 40s. You know what I mean? Probably mid 40s. And he's from southern, like central Ohio, like way down in the Willy Wags and southern Ohio. You know, like Shawnee area, that like way down there. And he the way he described it was when he was young, they lived in a basically a double wide, a trailer that somebody had given his dad, and his dad had moved it to a property owned by a friend of his, you know what I mean? And they lived out on somebody else's property. And, you know, he very poor. That part of, I mean, really this whole side of the state, you know, is like pretty depressed and, you know what I mean? Like Appalachia in general, you know what I mean?
You're talking like Waverly, Piketon, kind of that area, Adams County.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, he told me he had vivid memories when he was a kid, of his mom rounding everybody up and like all of his, you know, brothers and stuff into the living room and saying that thing's outside, you know, things outside. And he could remember hearing something like bump and, you know, like rub against the, you know, he'd hear like a rub or a scratch or a bump on the outside of the trailer. And sometimes it'd walk around just once, sometimes it'd do a few passes around the trailer and then it'd leave, you know, but his mom would always like kind of round up the kids so she knew where all the kids were, you know what I mean, while that thing was outside. And he also remembers the property owner who owned the actual property where the thing was happening, you know, or where they lived, you know, pulling down their driveway and telling his dad, like, hey, that thing's been out on the field. Don't let the boys go out, you know, hunting today. Like that thing's been out in the corner of the field. Okay. So he, right. So, but here's the thing. This guy actually told me, and I can't tell you his name. I can't give you an exact location because he didn't give me permission. You know what I mean?
Sure.
I should have gotten it like written down, you know, hey, can I call you up and verify these things? But it was just such a good story.
Get out your notary seal and.
Yeah. He said like, as he got older, you know, and his exact words were, I didn't read the books that I was supposed to, in school, let alone anything about Bigfoot. And we didn't have cable. You know what I mean? Like, we could barely keep the lights on. We didn't have cable. But he was like 19 at a friend's house, and they were sitting around, and on like TBS, Harry and the Hendersons came on, you know? Okay. Harry and the Hendersons, which is classic. And
sure.
You know what I mean? Like, but he goes, oh, hey, it's the thing. And his friend's like, what in the hell are you talking about? It's the thing. It's Bigfoot. It's not real. It's Bigfoot. This is a goofy kids show. And he's like, no, that's the thing. What? You didn't have the thing? You know what I mean? Like, and that's what he's saying. He's like, it's the thing. Like, and he said, that's when I realized, like, this was not everybody had the thing. You know what I mean? This thing out in their woods.
Wow.
He said it was just a matter of course. You know what I mean? Like, it was just a matter of course when he was younger and they lived in that area. And then he kind of forgot about it. You know, he just assumed everybody had encountered something weird, you know. Wow. And then he got older and they're watching something silly like Harry and the Hendersons. He's like, oh, no, it's the thing. I know what that is, you know. And his friend's like, no, it's not real. And he's like, no, it's 100% real. Like, I've seen it, you know. And I'm like,
that's amazing.
You know, so when he told me that story, I was like, man, and this guy did not seem like he didn't want to talk about it. His wife made him talk about it. And it just did not seem like a, you know, it's a good story. You can make it up if you really, but he didn't seem like he was being that creative with any of it. You know what I mean?
I just think what the heck is the point of going, and not to say you're
what
not
is the
anybody,
point?
John,
Right.
but what's the point of going and finding John Hickenbottom at the park to go, I'm going to give you my Bigfoot story in hopes that one day you'll go on another show and talk about it.
Podcast.
Yeah,
right. I mean,
and you don't have his name, right? Like, you can't track him down.
No. And I usually, like, I mean, I get, you know, some of the well-known stories. I've talked to people, like people getting rocks thrown at them, you know, that seems to be one of Salt Fork's things, is that, like, fishermen getting rocks pelted at them. You know what I mean? That seems to be a thing at Salt Fork. What that is, I don't know. You know what I mean? Or how like exaggerated that is, I don't know. But I know that I've talked to quite a few people who claim to have been out fishing, and, you know, softball-sized rocks started popping out of the woods.
When it gets a little bit more interesting, when it's not just a pebble, but it's like it's launching a sizable projectile to make you go, oh, a bird didn't drop that from the sky.
Right.
That's like the wild men of Vietnam. Like the Vietnam vets had the stories of what did they call those? The 8 men of Vietnam forest.
Know this one.
Right.
Yeah, Vietnam vets would report them just all day long marching through these forests and just rocks being pelted constantly down at them. And they called that.
I know that.
And, you know, John Mayenzinski, he had his experience where the thing, you know, pushed in on his tent, and he thought it was a bear, so he kind of popped it on the nose, and he hit a kneecap. You know what I mean?
Oh, really?
Yeah. I mean, yeah. Do you know? Have you ever heard of John Mayenzinski?
No, do tell.
He was like a backcountry ranger in, I think, Wyoming, doing bighorn sheep work and stuff but he has a story. You guys can look him up. He's pretty well known. He's a great educator too. He's also somebody that I would really love to make contact with. You know?
Question. Was this, did Micah talk about this at?
He probably did.
He's the gentleman that gets way onto these national parks and nobody else is there. Okay. Yes. Please go on. Cause I do remember this.
But, you know, he talks about, like, thinking that it was a bear still. And that night he goes out and sits by the fire with his, you know, gun, just in case it's a grizzly.
Yeah.
And as he's sitting there, you know, a pine cone, you know, hits him in the head, and then another pine cone. And another pine cone, you know, and then one hits him in the shoulder. And I'm like, well, you know, that seems to be one of those things that happens pretty consistently, is like those projectiles and stuff. So, I mean, I don't know. It's such an interesting subject, and there's so many stories out there that it's really hard for me to, you know, I mean, that's why I try to do a good job. That's, you know.
Can I present one to you and get your opinion?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, just because I think this would be fun, because we've had a guest that's put this one to us before, and I love it. And it's this story that potentially Teddy Roosevelt saw a Sasquatch, but he wrote about it. He wrote this collection of stories about hunting and being in the wilderness, but he included in it one story that was not necessarily him, but it was someone else in referencing this Sasquatch encounter. And it led me to the question of like, so he invented the national park, didn't invent it, but established the national parks and the park systems. So are these big swaths of land like a preserve for cryptids and Sasquatch and
that is a fantastic thing. I love that.
I mean, it's untouched. There's lots of woods. There's natural resources. There's millions of square miles.
The theory is Teddy Roosevelt didn't use his name. A lot of people think that that's actually his story.
Yeah,
his story.
That basically gives it a character because he was going to be running for president.
Yeah, he didn't want to put his name next to that story necessarily.
Some people think that it was Teddy Roosevelt's Sasquatch.
And it was the only one that he included in this story of stories that were about him.
That wasn't
right.
So it's really strange. Like, why throw that wrinkle in?
Man, I want that theory to be true. Like I want
you need to talk to DA. We need to hook you up with DA for that one.
I want NPS to be big, just big cryptid reserves. That's what I mean. Like that's great. That's fantastic.
We need to hook him up with DA.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
DA Roberts, he's a YouTuber and podcaster. His the Ex Machina podcast, but he's him and Robbie Raines, they do a couple shows a week, but
but he's also the North American Dogman Project.
Yeah, like he's the head of the North American director of the North American Dogman Project.
Got his nose to the
I've
ground.
heard the name.
Which is how we found him. We did an episode on Dogmen, and then we're kind of doing research, and then I was just looking for audio or photos, and he popped up. And I'm like, let me hit this guy up, see if he'll talk to us. And he's like, yeah, I'll do your podcast. Sweet.
Yeah.
So we kind of accidentally discovered DA.
That's awesome.
And we've been on his show a couple times, and we're hoping to have him on again soon. But their big thing is Dogman and the LBL. And so
Land Between the Lakes, if LBL sometimes
the
Missouri side.
Because that was the and I've because there's a really well-known story from the Land Between the Lakes about like the people who were staying on the houseboat and claimed to have seen somebody actually getting like
killed,
mauled.
Yeah.
Wait, what?
That's what
it's a pretty well-known, like that's a pretty well-known story that that there were people like on a houseboat, and then nobody would believe them because obviously like
Do you have a take or a feeling on LBL area? Squatchy, not squatchy, strange?
Oh no, I don't. I actually haven't. I haven't actually visited. I couldn't tell you. It seems to be a lot of activity of something down there. And I think that maybe some of the Dogman sightings maybe could be, since Dogman's kind of in everybody's mind now and it's been growing in popular. Maybe some of them are like misidentified, Bigfoot. You know what I mean? Like sometimes you don't know, but can't be all of them. I don't think. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like because it seems like there's an awful lot. I don't know. That's firmly in the realm of I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Fair enough.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Before we went live and started recording, John, we brought up Dogmen a little bit, and you had a story of your own from your property. I don't know if you can share that story or
sure.
Let us know what you had found too.
So I can't say that it's a dog, but I live in part of my property is a floodplain, and it seems also be the part of the property where the best deer are. So I hunt and kind of manage that end of the property quite a bit for deer and wildlife. And my wife and I were out, for a walk on the property one day, and I came across pretty large paw prints. And I've got a 70-pound coonhound, like a big coonhound. I mean, dumber than a sack of hammers, but he's a big boy, and he's got pretty big paws on him. But I came across some paw prints that were pretty large, and I honestly, now I have no way of knowing what they were. They could just be a big stray dog, you know what I mean? But I've compared them to my dog, and they're neither of my coonhounds. I've got one that's much smaller. But they're neither of theirs. So I've ran my dogs on my property, but they're neither of their paw prints. It's significantly bigger. And I took a cast of one. And I don't know
There
how
you
well
go.
you can. Yeah. So I don't know if you can see that central pad and then the toes, you know what I mean? All through here. And you can kind of see compared to my hand, that's a pretty large paw, that area right through there. And I actually got two. I kind of picked the two best ones. You know what I mean? So all I can say for sure is it was just a pretty big canine. Yeah. This one's kind of dirty. This was but there's that central pad. This one, I think would probably be a 4 foot, like a front paw.
But it's like almost in the center. It fits in the center of your palm.
Mm-hmm. Right.
That's a big,
and it was just
canine.
It was just big. And that's all I can say is that it was a big canine.
Yeah.
Again, I'm not a dog man person. I don't know what to make of the dog man stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But also I've been trying to practice. Like part of the reason why I took casting is because I've been trying to practice taking plaster casts. You know what I mean?
Right.
Those are good ones.
I haven't done it since college, and figured if I'm in the Bigfoot, business, I should probably learn how to, get better at taking plaster casts.
Yeah.
But I thought it was interesting enough to, because like I said, it's certainly bigger than my coon dog, So.
And you can tell as a naturalist that it is a canine of some kind.
Yeah, I mean it's a canine, and we have bobcats here. I've accidentally got bobcats in my coyote sets before out here. So we have, I get but bobcats aren't nearly that big. But you got to remember, cats have retractable claws, like your house cat. They don't. So when they walk, their claws aren't making little dimples, and these clearly have claws, and they're clearly a canine. Not a bear. A bear sometimes bears will look like a human handprint on the ground. You know what I mean? Like they'll look a little human handprint with a really long. You can see the nail indents. But sometimes though, and bears will do one thing that I always keep my eye on for like possible Bigfoot footprints out of the park when people find them is that bears do this thing when they're walking. A lot of times their rear foot will obscure a part of the forefoot's print. Does that make sense?
They step in their own print.
Mm-hmm.
So they step in their own print. Now that's not like at a perfect gait, you know what I mean? But an 8-inch bear paw could turn into a 16-inch Bigfoot print pretty easy that way. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
When you got that forefoot and that hind foot being combined, you know what I mean, as they're walking. But yeah, I mean, you learn a lot about, just being outside and hunting, especially, like you learn a lot about tracking and how things move through the woods, And this was in a predictable spot for like, it was a nice, nice game trail. And I get coyotes. I've never seen a coyote quite that big, but I get coyotes out here. Yeah, I don't know what it was. Like I said, I'm not a dog man person, but we were talking about it before, and it's firmly in that I don't know territory too.
I don't know how it got brought up, but you were like, oh, well, this is. Yeah. I definitely don't know, but I did. Let me go get something real quick. I'll show you guys. We're like, what's he grabbing? But I mean, it's impressive.
I know how it came about. We were talking about doing like a story and how if we had to blur faces out and change voices, like, we did that before. And John's like, no, you don't have to do that to me. Like, that's fine.
North Carolina Dogman encounter video.
But and then he goes, oh yeah, I've got some prints. We're like, yeah, go get those. Let's see them. Like,
so those are.
But who knows? What the heck they are?
Yeah, who knows?
But John just started. You said you moved to your property. You've only been there 2 years, and you're still getting to know. Imagine that.
Yeah,
he lives on 20 acres. But he's lived there for 2 years and is still getting to know.
Are you kidding?
The property.
Yeah, that's a lot of acreage to get to learn.
It is. You get thousands and thousands of acres. Millions. In some parks. But I'm saying just one park alone, like thousands and thousands of acres.
Like millions in a park.
Well, Salt Fork is 20,000 acres.
Just Salt Fork.
20,000 acres. Salt Fork is 20,000 acres.
Right.
That's 20,000 acres.
And I know
hiding
in there.
I would say that I know Salt Fork better than this property. Like I grew up out at Salt Fork. I killed lots of deer out at Salt Fork. I've been places where people aren't. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I know Salt Fork better than this property, but I can't tell you know what I mean? Like if you come to the park in the spring and say, hey, where can I see a Wilson's warbler? Like I can send you to the spot in the springtime where you're going to see it. You know what I mean? I can't do that here, but there's still places out at Salt Fork that I'm, not as familiar with as others, and, there's and that is the cool thing about the subject is everything else aside, the mystery that's out there, you know what I mean? The mystery of it is it's really important. I think it's important to our psyche, you know what I mean?
Right.
Having that mystery out there. And it's one of the things that fascinates me the most is that mystery, you know.
Keeps you driven.
I think that's the carrot that dangles in front of us.
Right.
Yeah.
Keeps
driving
right,
us.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
If we knew everything, we'd be okay, cool, we'd stop, you know, but there is always a question, and that's why it's like, well, you know, what
exactly
what's going to be the end of everything? Like, you know,
right.
Again, like, is there finite or is there infinite? And I struggle with both of the concepts. Like I was trying to explain to somebody about, you know, thinking of my own life, like, okay, when I do pass away, if that's it and it's just finite, or if it's infinite, I can't accept either one really and understand it. I can't understand things being like over and done, and I can't understand them going forever. Like forever. Yeah. Like, will I be conscious forever, or will I be able to have these memories forever after even, you know, this, like, it's crazy. It's hard to wrap your head around.
I don't think we're necessarily hardwired to have that.
Yeah.
You know, it's like geologic time. Like we can grasp human lifetimes. We can grasp 100-year.
Right.
We can grasp 100-year. You know, if we can categorize everything in 100-year blocks, we can grasp that. But when you're talking about geologic time, I mean, thinking that like humanity, I mean, we've all seen those scales where it's like, well, if this is a human timeline, we're in the last half an inch or whatever, you know what I mean, of history.
Yeah,
you know
we showed up in like the last second of the 24 hours of a day.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, right. It's hard for us to grasp. That's why we have to have those comparisons, because it's hard for us to grasp 4 billion years,
right?
Or 65 million years. Every kid will regurgitate. 65 million years ago there were dinosaurs, but when you actually think about it, you can't really grasp 65 million years.
Doesn't make sense.
No, it doesn't.
That and all the timelines are being pushed back. The age of the universe, the age of Earth. Now, human beings are 300,000. The cave art that they found.
Everything is
when the first the first people in North America that keeps getting pushed back. I mean, I think when I learned it in college, you know what I mean? When we were learning like, the historical side of things in college, how to interpret that, it was still like 15,000 years. You know what I mean? That was in the mid 2000s. You know what I mean? That was like, now it's 23,000 years,
Clovis is probably what you were learning back then.
Right.
Was Clovis got completely obliterated.
Right.
That just got moved, quadrupled.
And there's even some, there's some theories that, right. Yeah. So yeah, it's crazy. It's hard to think about it. So, yeah.
But we're living in exciting times where you have a lot of people that are really taking these,
for sure,
I guess, focuses that weren't being taken as seriously when it comes to UAPs, Sasquatch. We have a lot more respectable folks that are in the field legitimizing it, which I think is unparalleled.
Right. I mean,
in the last,
and it's so much in the popular culture. It's kind of impossible for that to be the case. You know what I mean? Yeah. Or for that not to be the case.
Yeah.
Now, because it's like, well, I mean, I remember when the History Channel before it went, all UFOs all the time.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
But like, like now it is so much.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how many ghost hunter shows are there? That's like a game that I play when I go to like a hotel and I don't have a streaming service. I'm just like, well, how many ghost shows can I find on TV at once? You know what I mean? It's like, I mean, right. I think it's so much part of the human psyche now. Like it's so much ingrained in our consciousness. It's kind of hard for that not to be the case, for it not to be, at least the start of it getting taken more seriously.
Absolutely. Yeah. Wow. John, this has been a great conversation.
It's been great.
We appreciate you doing this and coming and hanging out.
I love what you do. Yeah,
I love what you do.
Well, thanks,
we grew up in the sticks. I was identifying with a lot of what you were saying because I grew up looking for birds, snakes, crayfish, turtles, whatever. I mean, hell, man, I flagged down a semi-tractor trailer to try to get him to watch the snapping turtle one day when I was about 11 years old in the middle of the street.
Awesome.
In the country.
That's awesome.
Hey.
He had it on a scoop shovel.
He wouldn't do it. He didn't stop for me. I flagged down 3 separate individuals and they all bailed on me. And that snapper got away. my mom was like, what were you going to do with it anyways? I'm like, I don't know. It was like a 20-pound, it was a huge alligator snapper.
That was my mom likes to recount the story about me coming home with a groundhog, full-size groundhog. I just hopped off my bike and picked it up one day. It's all angry. And I wanted to keep it.
Wait. You picked it up and it wasn't happy? I figured this thing willingly went with you, like you coaxed it somehow.
Oh, yeah.
No.
You're not joking about Steve Irwin.
No, I picked it up and man, it was like, and I got it just perfect behind the shoulders, you know what I mean? But it's snarling. And yeah, my mom loves to bring that story up, especially now that I got kids, you know what I mean? When I'm like, hey, don't pick that up. She'll be like, oh, well, you brought home a groundhog, you know what I mean? Like, so she loves bringing that up,
Oh,
I would say, did your mom just freak out like when you brought that thing close, or did you bring it in the house?
Yeah, my mom is the hardest person to surprise now.
Oh,
you know what I
man.
mean? Like my mom and my wife there's nothing like when my wife first moved in and opened my freezer and saw that there were like dead things in it.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like, and she's like, what is all the, why do you have a dead snake in the freezer? I'm like, well, I got to put it in a jar. I haven't got around to it. And like, like when she, she's gotten so much she's gotten so much more used to that sort of stuff.
Oh, because you're cataloging and you're like documenting and you're keeping them to show at the nature center.
Right,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, stuff like that. So, and then like, we also, we live on like a hobby farm. We're not, all of our kids are in 4-H.
Cool.
But
very cool.
We like to say that we're not 4-H people. It's been a few, I think we're on our 4th year of 4-H. And it's very clear that even though we're a part of 4-H, we're not 4-H people.
Yeah,
like we're not full-time farmers. Right. You know what I mean?
Raising pigs. And
we're like
we're
like homesteader people. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like we're like homesteader people.
Though,
so yeah, I mean,
cool.
My kids and wife were all butchering chickens yesterday. Like that was while I was at work. They were butchering some of the meat chickens. That's what we had for dinner before I got on was one of our chickens. So yeah, I mean, like she's all into that stuff too.
Well, I'm telling you, I'm serious about the morel thing. I'll come help out. I'll give you half of my take. Because here's the thing about him: if you don't find what, you got to give him at least half, like maybe more.
Right? He'll take your full.
I'm just going to say this: I did a morel hunt with a gentleman I used to work with at the hospital from Southern Ohio. I don't even know where it was because it was his friend's spot as well.
Yeah,
and it was really cool because I like being out in the woods. I've never gone morel hunting at this point, but I kind of let them know, like, I have the eye acumen for it. Just tell me what I'm looking for one time. I just need to see it in reference on the ground with the leaves and whatever. And after I saw that first one, it was just like game on, like just running through the hills.
Yeah.
And, I think I had like 3.5 pounds of morels by the end of it, and they were all just like crushing it. I mean, it was so much fun, and they're such a good mushroom that is only here for
they are amazing.
Such a brief time, but fry them babies up. Oh, they're so good.
I used to, when I was doing invasive species control. So when you're like bent over, you know what I mean, looking at the ground all day, you find the best mushroom. You know what I mean? Pulling weeds. Like invasive species. Yeah, that's the time to go look for them. Is go start to pull a patch of garlic mustard somewhere. You'll find them. Yeah, it's great.
Oh man, now you got me. Now I'm making myself hungry about morels.
Yeah. Well, we'll wrap up and we'll go get a morel. Maybe somebody's got a morel burger somewhere.
Oh my goodness!
You can get them freeze dried. They reconstitute all right. You can freeze. Yeah. You can order them freeze dried, and like they'll reconstitute all right. I mean, once you make gravy or something out of them, you can't tell.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
This has been great.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's been
absolutely.
Awesome. Thanks for having me on. It's been nice. Hopefully we'll get together at some conference or
yes.
I mean, like I said, I'm pretty excited about CryptidCon this year with, Travis Walton speaking there. I mean, Fire in the Sky was like one of the few movies that I ever watched when I was a kid that like really kept me up at night. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Me
it like
too.
really kept me up. Like Fire in the Sky freaked me out
when
I was a kid. So I'm pretty excited to, see Travis Walton at CryptidCon. So maybe I'll run into you guys there.
That'd be cool. Great. That'd be awesome.
Fire in the Sky really pushed me in a direction when I was a kid.
I really
that was a big moment.
I really want to go to CryptidCon this year.
We're gonna make plans. We're gonna do it a little bit differently this year. I think we're just gonna come in for the day, maybe come in Friday night, hang out a little bit, and then do the conference and head back out.
Yeah, that's kind of that's kind of my plan this year is to come in Friday night and get to hang out. Cause we usually, when we travel, we leave super early in the morning. You know what I mean? Like we'll leave at 2 a.m. and then get there when everything starts. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And that's what we did last year. So I think
Friday starts all day Friday. Did we go Friday?
No, we went to the meet and greet, which was
right.
It was cool. We met. That's where we met Justin and Jay the first night, and we met some folks.
Yep.
Those guys are awesome.
We met Jeremiah from Bigfoot Society there at that meet.
Also awesome. I haven't met many people who just aren't awesome in this community. You know what I mean? I've met a lot of nice people in this community.
Well, when you have this interest, you kind of, if you're finding similar minds, you usually have found the people that go, I don't want to hear what the hell you're talking about. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
Get out of here with that. And it's like, geez, okay.
Like brethren, you know.
And I'll take Bigfoot people over bird watchers any day. Like I love some bird watching, but I mean, I'll take them over bird watchers any day. You know, like they're a lot more interesting.
I love it.
Yeah.
That needs to be a shirt.
Bigfoot over birds.
I mean, there for what my stepdaughter kind of pushed me into like making having some sort of like image, you know what I mean?
Sure.
Like before, because people knew the videos and stuff, but
Absolutely.
so now I've got a business card that has just a red mustache.
Yes, that's your brand.
Because it's like my that's my brand. So maybe that'll be the merch is like Bigfoot over bird watchers or something. That'll be the
dude. That's awesome.
Squatch with a Hickenbottom mustache.
Squatch watch.
Yeah,
I bet Bigfoot's. I bet Squatch is a bird watcher. Squatch watching.
Of course.
Oh yeah, for sure. Well, I'm actually, I'm kind of planning. I talked to we've got like a local opera house here that does bluegrass music. I'm a big bluegrass guy. Like I love bluegrass music.
Oh yeah,
very cool.
And, I think I'm gonna try to do like a little bluegrass festival next summer called like Banjos and Bluegrass. We're gonna try to do or Banjos and Bigfoot. We're gonna try to do like a Bigfoot themed bluegrass day.
Wow.
Maybe get some of the artists and stuff that come down and then have like have bluegrass bands there. So I'm gonna try to do a Bigfoot Banjos and Bigfoot little bluegrass festival.
Love to come
next
out to
summer,
that.
Yeah, we're big music fans. We've been in working around music for years. Stoner's a giant bluegrass fan.
That's awesome.
Our director there in Master Control. Cool. So let us know. I mean,
sure.
I would love to, help you promote that. Have you on. Sure. If that becomes real, we can help in any way possible.
Yeah.
We can
just. I did an event this past. Weekend, and I was set up next to the local opera house. And, I was talking to their banjo player and I'm like, a Banjos and Bigfoot, like a Bigfoot themed bluegrass festival. So not like a bluegrass conference, but like a Bigfoot themed bluegrass little day,
I think that'd be cool.
Would be pretty cool. And I bet it would draw a crowd.
Tell you who you need out there.
Yeah, I think
you got to get a hold of Sasquatch
or something like that. Yeah.
Oh my God.
The saxophone squatcher.
Right. Everybody keeps bringing up old Sasquatch.
I love it.
Yeah. But hey, man, thanks for having me on. It's been great chatting with you.
Absolutely,
I love doing this, and I like it when you guys can kind of just turn me loose and let me ramble. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, that's
I always
what
get
this
nervous
show
when
is.
there's a list of questions. So yeah, I appreciate that. It's been awesome talking with you.
Great.
Thanks.
Likewise to we try to keep it loose and more of just a hang, if you will.
Absolutely.
But John, if you want to kind of send us out again, let us know where we can find you, connect. And then also just a couple last words, and we'll outro the show and we'll come back and say goodbye and chat a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So on my Instagram, I really don't have much in the way of social media other than Instagram, and that's Hickenbottom John at Hickenbottom John, and that's kind of the best way to find me. It's open. I post pictures of critters and things on there. Some Bigfoot stuff. I try to share other people's things too. And but that's a good way to get a hold of me. If you have a good story or if you want to chat about something, I'm pretty open to that. And otherwise, hopefully I try to make an appearance at most of the like local conferences, within 6 or 7 hours here. I try to make an appearance. I think we're going to try to go to the Fouke, Arkansas, like the Fouke Festival at some point, the Boggy Creek Festival at some point. But that might be a year or two down the road. But yeah. So if you see me, like I said, like a red mustache, it's hard to miss. I can't get rid of it now. It's like my brand. So,
I love it.
But
that's cool.
But So yeah, Instagram's probably the best way to get a hold of me if anybody's interested. I'm more than happy to chat with people. Like I said, a lot of people, that's one thing that I've noticed about this is a lot of people just want to be listened to. You know what I mean?
Sure.
They just want somebody to tell her, hear their story. As far as like, parting words, I would just say like the pursuit of this is worthwhile. I mean, the worst thing that could happen is you learn a little bit more about the natural world, like you're out in the woods, you go out squatching. If you go out looking for Bigfoot every single time you go out, you're going to be disappointed most of the time. You know what I mean? But if you go out there to learn what there is to learn, it will never disappoint you. It doesn't matter if it's the dead of winter, doesn't matter if it's spring and everything is blooming. You're never going to be disappointed, when you go out there. So just keep that curiosity alive, and keep that like childlike wonder. That's what drives me as a naturalist, is that like wonder for the natural world. That's what's important, important for this subject and just important in general. But that's what I think that's what I'll leave off on is keep that curiosity alive,
There you go, guys.
I love it.
Thank you so much, John
Appreciate
Hickenbottom,
you, John.
everybody. And also, John, we're going to be posting your series on Sasquatch for the Ohio Department of Natural Resources, which we've covered. But we'll make sure and put those in the links of the description. And, we'll have your Instagram link if anybody wants to connect. And we appreciate the heck out of you.
Yeah.
Hey, take care, John.
Thanks.
This has been awesome.
See you, John.
Nice.
See you, brother.
See ya. Bye.
There you go. Another great episode.
The train
dude.
has not stopped rolling.
Yeah. That was a good cherry on top for the last run of these records.
I'll tell you what.
Ended on a hell of a high note.
Tell you what, we should somehow, for all the stories he gets down there, somehow compile them. Be like, especially for the ones where he's like, I can't entertain all of them, but I want to get that. Put the Sasquatch journal out there. Like, I wonder if they have something like that at the park, or like, if you out and saw something, like put your encounter in here. Write it down, date, time, like have a little bit of like a charting system of like, where were you? What was the conditions? What did, some kind of systematic way of like filtering that information that's coming through the park, or
I'm sure it's a lot. Yeah.
Or parks should start renting like GoPro cams to like, patrons as they come through, and you could like slap helmets on all these people. I'm just trying to think, my theory of how I want to put cameras on top of everybody's roofs on their house to like look up for, UFO. I'm just thinking Truman Show on a grand scale here. I just started watching that show again.
2,000 acres of
just put cameras on everybody everywhere. Somehow we'll get all this stuff documented then, because there are so many instances where it's like, you can have a camera even, and it's still hard to get things filmed, photographed. Like, I don't care how good you are sometimes.
Yeah.
Like,
you can have a ton of gear out in the field.
Like
and
John's
as soon as your battery goes dead and you have to change your battery,
right,
and something happens, well, guess what? You didn't have a memory card in the camera, or your battery was dead.
There's all kinds of things that can happen. Or like he said, he's like, I put the snake under the log because, like, of course, like I'm going to try to show you, but you can't always just be there at the right moment at the right time. And even some of those wildlife photographers, they're looking around camera lenses that look like a bazooka, man. Like, you're not whipping that thing out and getting like a nice zoom telephoto lens of,
You're sitting there for hours in one spot in a blind, just
not
like
moving.
a hunter would.
We can go in, sweating like in the Ace Ventura Rhino waiting.
Yeah, those Nat Geo photographers are dedicated. Pretty hot in them rhinos. All right. Well, another Ace Ventura Pet Detective 2 reference, and we're signing out on that note.
Hey, because it's so hot in Master Control, it's like what's happening in Stoner.
Well,
look at it. Look at the lights.
We got to get this thing.
Look at the lights. Look at that. I've never seen it lit up like that.
Those guys are dying. That means wrap up, Bub. Stop talking.
Good to
Those
go.
guys are dying.
I think that means they hit the star in Mario Brothers.
As always, guys, at The Strange Road, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook.
We love you guys.
The Facebook group, Strange Road Hitchhikers. Like, subscribe, share. You know where to find us. Share it. Write a review. We love you guys. Peace.
Appreciate you.
We are out. God, what a good episode that was.
It's fun.
So
It's
good.
fun. Lots of fun.
Peace.